In this video, I'm going to talk about 3D toolpaths in MasterCAM. There are many 3D toolpath options that you can use in MasterCAM, but they are all grouped into two main categories. One is roughing, the other one is finishing. I'm going to use this example to show you the difference between these two types of toolpaths. Now let's take a look at the side view of this object. So here's the side view of the object. So if you have a cutting tool in here that I want to cut this direction to make this cuts at this surface, what I have to do is to come up over here and move up. If I have to do this, this means at this moment the cutting tool will be right here, and this will have to travel this path. That means that at the beginning, if this is a solid block, this cutting tool will cut that much material. Similarly, if I want to cut this curve, if the cutting tool comes in here and move this direction, let's say this is the block. Now at this moment, the cutting tool needs to cut that much material at once. This is not good because you are putting too much load on the cutting tool. So what you have to do is to cut it in layers. So what you have to do is to cut let's say the cutter, go this at this level, go a little bit, travel, come down just a little bit here, and just keep on cutting. So you're cutting layer by layer to remove the material. So now if I do that, let's say if I want to have the first layer, the cutting tool ends here, the second layer, the cutting tool ends here, the third layer, the cutting tool will end here, and so on. So this means I will have this kind of a steps at the end. Now, if I have a finish cut, let me finish it. So I will have something like this. After I do the proper cutting, so remove layer by layer, so I'm not using a lot of material. I'm not cutting a lot of material at a time. I'm just cutting a layer at a time. So, but by doing that, I will have some material left. So what this portion is called roughing. So this is the roughing toolpath. Now, because we have only a little bit left, I can have my cutting tool in here and just follow the path. And I'm not putting too much load in here. So that's the finish. And similarly, I can do the same thing in here. If I do have a cutting tool in this here, so what I will end up with is a bunch of steps in here. And now this will be my rough cuts. And then later on, say this is the steps that I have. So I can have my cutting tool over here and move this direction. So I can cut it at once and without putting too much load on the cutting tool. So these two right now is called finishing path because I'm not putting too much load on it. I just cut at the tip. And that is, and this one and this one is the roughing cuts. Now when you look at this shape, you can actually use a flat end mill, because I can still cut this flat end mill, using flat end mill to cut this surface. But in general, a lot of 3D surfaces you will want to use a ball end mill, because sometimes if you are cutting, if the cutting directions is not this way, if the cutting directions is that way, this will not work. The flat end mill will not work. You will need to use a ball end mill if the cutting direction is that way. If you take a look at this now, doesn't matter how fine this flat end mill move, you will get steps. But in order to remove these steps, you will need to use ball end mill. So it really depending on the direction that you are going to use. Now let's take a look at the second example. Assuming I have a pocket in here, this is a hole. So I cannot just use an end mill, go down and cut all the way in here in one shot. I will need to have some kind to machine layer at a time. So what I have to do is to use the roughing again to cut one layer here and then cut another layer and so on. And then when I'm done, I can have the final cutting tool come all the way down just to move around. So the first step, again, you have to use roughing, and then you can use finish. Then you can to finish the walls around these pockets. Now let's go back to the ball end mill, the difference between the ball end mill and flat end mill. In this case, because this is the corner radius is sharp, that yes, you can use a flat end mill. But if the bottom is not sharp, if this bottom has some contour, flat end mill will not do it. You will need to use a ball end mill depending on the radius to match the curve. So let's take a look at this. So if I have a ball end mill, let me do that again. So if I have a ball end mill in here, so right now, and then if I move the ball end mill a little bit more, this little thing here, it really depending on how fine you move your ball end mills to the next step. But if this is a flat end mill, you can see this is only one point cutting it, versus ball end mill, there's a little area in here that's cutting it. So your step over can be a little bit bigger and minimizing the time. But if you have a flat end mill, no matter how fine that you move, you're not going to get a smooth surfaces. So that's the big difference between the ball end mill and flat end mill when you are doing 3D surfaces. Now, so to recap, when you have a 3D toolpaths, you will need to have two different toolpaths. You should start with roughing, just to remove the material or everything as a chunk. And then when this is removed, and then you will do finish. And obviously, when you do the roughing, you don't cut all the way to this surface. You will leave a small room. So let me give you the actual what it should look like. You should leave some room in here so that you can have some material for it to cut. So I can go like this. So you can see that these points are not touching this line. So you should leave a small amount of material while you removing a major material in here. You can remove a lot of material in here using your roughing end mill, the roughing toolpath, and then you have some materials left. Now after that, then you can use the finished toolpaths. And in next video, I'm going to show you how to do that in MasterCAM.